Hello and welcome to our gardens. You join me in the back of our vegetable patch, or our kitchen garden as we like to call it, and we have a bunch of flowers back here, and we planted these to attract more pollinators here into our vegetable garden to pollinate all of the food that we have back here. But the sort of hidden joy of this is that we have lots of flowers to harvest for vases, but also for plates. So we have been eating some of these delicious edible flowers as well. Not any of these, but I'll show you some of them. So here's one of our dahlias, and I think we put about 15, 20 dahlias in the back of this veggie patch. But this one is so stunning. It's got this velvety, almost sort of like black touch to the petals, which is stunning. And then also in the center, it opens up beautifully so that the pollinators can get in there, which is a beautiful added bonus here. But, you know, every dahlia variety is edible, and not just the petals, but actually the tubers as well. So I've been having so much fun just adding these to dishes in the kitchen because, you know, harvesting flowers for flower arranging is one of my hobbies. I love to do it, but I also think it's really fun just to sprinkle a little bit of magic in the form of these petals and these beautiful edible flowers onto your plate. So you can use things like dahlias. I saw a recipe for a dahlia tuber quesadilla, and then with like sprinkled dahlia petals on top, which looked amazing. You can use basil flowers. You know, if your basil has gone to seed and you're like, ah, man, I let it go. It's actually a great opportunity to harvest those basil flowers. They taste really nice. And you can just sort of sprinkle them on top of maybe pasta instead of using Parmesan cheese. It's a really delicious alternative. You can also eat things like borage, pansies, violas, all kinds of things. Obviously, do your own research and make sure that you know what you're eating if you eat anything from the garden or from the wild larder. Another one that's fantastic is nasturtiums. They are just so vibrant and beautiful. You know, there's a nasturtium for every garden. We had in our cottage garden, which is sort of softer colors, we had a really beautiful peach colored nasturtium called Peach Melba. This is Empress of India. Now, Empress of India can look really vibrant orange, or it can even skew like deep, rich red, kind of similar to this dahlia in color, which is pretty interesting. But these are actually fantastic flowers and plants in general to get kids interested in gardening. The seeds are really big, so they're easy for kids to kind of manipulate and plant in the soil. They're very easy to start, and it's so much fun to see the seeds start to germinate, because they come up and their seed leaves almost look like little miniature lily pads. They aren't exactly true to the lily pad-like leaves of our nasturtium in maturity, but they're so cute and little. And, you know, because the flowers are so easy to grow, it's just a really fun thing for kids to see. And then they can eat the flowers. You can also eat the lily pad-like petals. So that's a great one for just getting kids interested in that whole process of seed to germination to table. So these edible flowers are just fantastic because, you know, helping to foster excitement, curiosity, and inspiration in kids for the natural world is a wonderful way of creating a new generation of garden and nature lovers. The gardeners and experts in today's episode really understand the importance of inspiring and educating children. In this episode, we learn all about the Saturday Morning Kids Gardening program at the Manchester Community Library.
If we could just plant every week, every child would be happy, I swear. But unfortunately, that's not how it works.
Then we return to the historic Hildene to explore their educational programs and their pollinator gardens.
Makes sense to say that hands-on programming is at the heart of our program, so kids learn by doing.
And I'll continue picking and arranging our flowers. So when you are harvesting your flowers, it's ideal to do this first thing in the morning. So you want to do this when there's still a little bit of dew in the grass. And this way, you know, there's a lot of moisture in the flowers. And you want to make sure that you're putting them straight into some water. So I have a cheeky little glass here. a little jar here. And so I just slide that into the basket just because this is easier for me to carry around. And I have a little lid in there. I filled this just with some purified water and a little bit of sugar. That was a trick that I learned from my Nana. But here we have zinnias, you know, all of the pollinators love those. The celosia, really, really beautiful, great for drying. The zinnias, the hummingbirds come and visit those as well, and the butterflies. So those are a great one to have in the back of a vegetable patch or anywhere where you're growing food. But those are also a really fun one for kids as well because they're so vibrant and cheerful. And it just looks like a little, I used to call them like a little crown. Of the golden crown in the center of the flower. So, so beautiful. And when you cut the flowers, you just want to make sure that you're getting a decent sized stem. You want to make sure that, you know, you're not taking away any critters. You might even shake them off a little bit, although usually they end up kind of climbing off on our route from the vegetable patch back to the cottage. But you can strip off the bottom leaves, and that makes it a lot easier. And I like to just snip the bottom at an angle, making sure that you're getting nice, fresh, beautiful flowers that don't have any diseases in them is really, really helpful, especially since you're bringing them into the house, or we are most of the time bringing them, you know, these are probably gonna sit in our bedroom, and we have other houseplants in there. So you wanna make sure you're not bringing critters or any diseases into your home that might affect your houseplants. And particularly if you are harvesting, you know, for eating, you know, if you're harvesting edible flowers, you want to be really, really careful, and you want to harvest things that you'd feel really comfortable putting in a vase, something really beautiful. Those are the ones you want to harvest to put on the plate as well. So let me give you an example with this celosia. This is part of a mix that I planted from seed of the Pampas plume celosia, and great for drying, like I said, but you want to just kind of come back on the stem to meet another set of leaves. You know, it's a little bit later in the season, so I am not sure how likely it is that these other little buds are going to go ahead and bloom, but it's always nice to just go back and cut at those little areas to give the plant a chance to really kind of bulk out. And when you follow it down the stem and cut it at a place where there's a fork and two other sets of leaves, that'll usually produce, you know, a bushier, kind of healthier plant. So coming through and cutting your flowers, your annuals and things like that, it really does encourage more growth for most annuals. So I'm going to continue to harvest while you pay a visit to the Manchester Community Library, where they've created an incredible program for kids.
It definitely depends on the group of children. Some really just want the hands-on experience of like planting stuff. Loved that in the beginning. If we could just plant every week, every child would be happy, I swear. But unfortunately, that's not how it works. Some really like the bugs. My son, Sylvius, like he's just like, bugs? Can we just look for bugs? So we've definitely done a lot of bug sensory bins and like the worms and ladybugs. Some kids really like the stories and the craft element, and definitely you're a little bit more hesitant to like fully engage with the plants. But really just, I think like making the connections between like, this is something that I eat at home, and this is it growing in the garden, and this is what the plant looks like, and just, you know, the natural life stages of the garden through the season is definitely the most intriguing thing for young kids. My name is Osha French, and I am a volunteer, and I do the Learning Garden program for young children ages 0 through 8. So sunflower is actually made of 2 different flowers. So I grew up on an organic farm and apiary in Dorset, Vermont. So from a really early age, I was out in the garden. I had my own plot that I got to, you know, plant whatever I wanted, but I also had to help with everything else. So it was kind of thrust upon me at an early age, and I always liked it, but you know, it was kind of like a chore, but I definitely grew into loving it for various reasons. Definitely, I went to college for environmental studies. So kind of looking at it as like a solution to environmental issues and integrating it into like environmental education, put it in like a new light for me of like really recognizing its benefits beyond just growing delicious food. So I have a BA in environmental studies with a concentration in early childhood environmental ed. So I'm going to be working at the forest school, Fiddleheads, this fall, but I've done lots of things like this in the past as far as like volunteering time and doing little lessons, and like I was homeschooled as a kid up till high school too. So I've kind of given back to that community as far as doing different classes and lessons for homeschooled children. We started last summer, and we just had one garden last summer, and then we put in a second bed this summer. So it's definitely blossomed this year. It's really open to any children, 0 through 8, early childhood, and their families. So also I try to make it pretty available to older children as well. And so if there's like, you know, an 8-year-old or a 5-year-old that wants to participate and they have a 12-year-old sibling, I will have ways to like make it just as engaging for them. We try to integrate some books. We start usually with a theme story time. I do have a lesson plan that I put together before each week. So we'll have different themes. We've done like ladybugs, where we released live ladybugs in the garden. We got to look at them. We listened to a ladybug story, and then people had like a craft that they could bring home to like make little ladybugs at home. We made a worm bin one day, and that was really fun. So we had like all the different materials, and kids would put it in and put the worms in, listen to a story. So today we had 3 kids. Sometimes we have 20, sometimes we have 2. So it's definitely a wide variety, which makes it challenging. I have to stay on my feet as far as prepping materials and having enough. And sometimes we have a lot more than we need, and then we just hand them out to families that come into the library. So like I said, I prep lesson plans ahead of time for the summer, and I usually give Carson, the children's librarian, some like recommendations that I've found like relate well to the overarching lesson. And then she checks what the library has already. We try to just use what the children's library already owns, but sometimes she orders things too. So we have kids that usually come back every week, and so that's awesome because they get to see the garden grow that they planted at the beginning of the season, and we, you know, have a nice relationship going at this point. And then we have kids that, you know, are visiting from the city or whatever. They're here, they stop in, which is also really beneficial, that they just get a little taste of what's going on and come back if they can. So for the students that come back like regularly, I definitely see just like a pride in watching the garden grow, and like their comfort level like with me as, you know, helping them with the different activities and in the garden space. Yeah. I mean, I think working with little kids, there's always just little moments where it's like, this is really cute or hilarious or whatever. And just their understanding too sometimes, or familiarity with things, the connections they make in those moments. Working with like the worm bin was kind of hilarious and fun, because you have the kids that are like really comfortable with it, and you know, they're like bringing the worms over, they're super gentle, and the other kids that like want to engage but are like, like what is this? Like, you expect me to like pick up like 300 worms? Like, so that's, you know, that's fun to just witness sort of the evolution of each kid's experience of like their natural curiosity, but also hesitation, and like their programming of like being scared of certain things or whatever previously. But for me, the biggest thing is just interacting with nature and with the garden, becoming more comfortable with the outdoors, with food, just getting their hands dirty, literally. Like, I'm just happy when people are playing with the sensory bins. I get soil from organic farms, so even just like the microbiome of like playing with soil to me is like a good takeaway. But yeah, just having fun and environmental literacy, like the early stages of creating like positive relationship with the environment and through gardening to kind of foster their like biophilia, their love for nature. Yeah.
So we are back in the cottage garden. I had so much fun going over and seeing those kids learning about sunflowers and pollinators and vegetables. That was just such a joyful day. I absolutely loved it. So we snipped a few more flowers, and I think I'm just gonna spend some time in the garden just arranging these. You know, these Play in the Blues salvia are so stunning. Can you hear this little bumblebee? We have been noticing that our bumblebee population in our garden has, I mean, it's just exploded. When we first moved here, every time we would see a bumblebee, it was like this big thing. It was like, wow, like a bumblebee, oh my gosh. But now there are just millions in our garden. We just see them all the time. They are all over the place. Sorry. They don't like that I'm here probably. And you know, wildlife is just such an important part of why we garden. You know, we have a new chipmunk burrow right over there, and we've been seeing the mama chipmunk and these two baby chipmunks come in and out of it. And it's just incredible. It's almost like we've, created this garden almost like a stage, and we just get to sit back and watch the play of life just unfold before us. It's really, really magical. And a garden that has this at the heart of their mission is the historic Hildene. Now, we paid a visit to them in an earlier episode to see their exquisite formal gardens. But this time we're heading back to hear all about their education program, which has pollinators as the stars of the show.
At the end of the day, what kids care about and value affect us all. And they can be important advocates for change. In other words, when adults see the world through the lens of a child, they're often motivated to change their behaviors. And we've seen that here at Hildene, where we talk about, don't cut your lawn as frequently, or let the flowers grow. And, we have parents come and tell us, I can't mow my dandelions, I can't mow my lawn because of you. For me, that's a victory, yes. When we think about our programming here, it makes sense to say that hands-on programming is at the heart of our program. So kids learn by doing. They're encouraged to be questioners, investigators, whether they learn about pollination by dissecting a flower, they role play to learn about the numerous jobs of the worker bee in the honeybee colony, or they dip for macroinvertebrates in the stream to better understand aquatic adaptations. And through all that chaos, and it's always fairly boisterous, they ask questions, they make observations, and they reflect upon, what we've been doing. So everybody's usually pretty excited. I'm Deon Newton, the Youth Education Director at Hildene. Well, I would say I was a gardener before I was a beekeeper, for sure. I've never been a gardener per se here at Hildene, but I have helped with things here at Hildene. Down below in the Dean, where the lower part of our property, a few years ago now, we installed what we call pollinator pathways. They are pathways, they're long, continuous rows of flowers that stretch across the meadow, so to connect pollinator habitat. So that sort of enlarges the area for bees and other pollinators to forage. So we, in the UF Ed team, that was really a big part. That was a project for us, a big project actually. So that's when I thought maybe I should stick to teaching, not gardening. Then about 6 years ago, I became the beekeeper at Hildene, and I had been keeping bees, so it was a natural fit actually to step in when our beekeeper left. We have 8 hives in the Dean, and we harvested 50 gallons from our 5 production hives this summer, late summer, like July, into July. So that was a good harvest. It was a good year. It was a good year. The bees did well this year. In my history with education, well, I've been at Hildene for 22 years, so I've had a lot of that history is right here. I did some work for the Vermont Institute of Natural Science and also for Bonnievale Environmental Education Center before I came here. But it's always been focused on natural science. And when I came here, I had to expand because we are pretty diverse. We're a historic site and we're also an agricultural site. But natural science is really my background.
I am Andrea Luchini, horticulturist at Hildene, the Lincoln Family Home here in Manchester, Vermont. All these plants that we plant with them, we grow in our greenhouse. So these are native perennials that all are good at supporting pollinators. And we've grown them in our greenhouse. We sell them here in the store for the same thing, but we use them with the students to plant the garden. So this is a first-year garden, just planted in
end of June.
Early summer. And we planted this side over here last summer. So this has only been in the ground for a year.
Yeah. The Youth Ed program is staffed by myself and Lisa Maginot. She's our assistant director. And together we design and teach natural science, history, and agricultural programs to primarily elementary age students in our region. During the school year, we offer 22 programs. And about 3,000 students participate in one or more of those programs each year. In addition, we have about another 100 students that participate in one or more of our summer day camps. We have an observation hive in the Youth Ed building, so the kids can get up close and not be too scared to see honeybees. We talk about who's who in the hive, how flowers are pollinated, what's special about the design of a honeybee, how honeybees communicate with each other. So a lot of times that's through pheromones, smells, but we focus on their dance language, so kids will act out that. And the steps that we can do to promote honeybees and other pollinators in our backyards, schoolyards. In our bumblebee program, so Vermont had 17 species of bumblebees, and we're down to about 13. But to introduce kids that bumblebees, you see one that's not necessarily all the same, right? So we get them to think about the differences in color patterns between species. So we focus on 4 common bumblebees that we see, all on property. And then we talk about and get into the life cycle of a bumblebee, which is pretty fun. Bumblebees, the only bumblebees left in the late fall are the new mated queens. And so they have to, get their reserves built up with the late blooms, and then they hibernate in the soil. And then in the spring they emerge hungry. So again, that spring habitat is really important for flowers. And what's really special about the bumblebees is that the queen, and we see this all the time at Hildene, the new queens, they come out and they zigzag on the soil or the grass looking for a good nest site. And they're really particular. They spend a lot of energy like zigzagging around trying to find a place to raise their brood. And once once she's chosen that site, then she gets in there and she'll make a wax cup, fill it up with nectar, and then she goes out and collects pollen and places it so that it's close to her wax pot of nectar. And then she lays her eggs, and then she will incubate her eggs. She's like a bird. They're such good moms. So she raises their first brood, and then after that, the worker bees, her daughters, take over. Then her only job then is to lay eggs. So the kids can, we can go out in the field and we can observe them nectaring. We can observe queens in the spring looking for nest sites. We can talk about differences that we see between bumblebees. So they get pretty excited.
So behind me here is our butterfly garden. It's not just native plants, but it has plants that support butterflies in different ways. So either nectar plants for them to feed on, or host plants, meaning the plants that their larvae, the caterpillars, eat and need to have to live and thrive and become adults.
While butterflies are the most noticeable pollinator, they're not our most important pollinator. And the reason is that during the larval stage, the caterpillar stage, they're eating plants, right? And in the larval stage of the bees, they're eating pollen. So bees are flying throughout the landscape, gathering and transporting pollen back to the hive. Doing this, pollen is getting transferred, around a lot. But they are pollinators during the adult stage, monarchs sip nectar. And so they do pick up pollen, and it does get spread around between the flowers. So while we do talk about that, we focus on, in the monarch program, their habitat, their life cycle, and their migration, including tagging and releasing a monarch before it begins its journey to central Mexico, to the mountains of central Mexico. And in that program, kids will go out to one of our gardens here. We will have them draw plants, notice the interactions between the pollinators and what's going on, what they are doing with the plant, and what preferences they may have. Some butterflies like flat top flowers. Honeybees are pretty generalist. They like almost any flower, but while bumblebees like they're able to get nectar from tubular flowers, whereas a honeybee and a butterfly cannot. So we talk about those differences, and that's why you want to have different flowers in your gardens to attract, different pollinators.
So zinnias, while they're not a native flower, they are great for bees and butterflies. As Deon says, they have a nice spot for butterflies to land on and perch, so they don't have to flap their wings to get their nectar. Native plants are really important because they have co-evolved with our native pollinators.
Some pollinators are specialists, whereas some are generalists. In other words, so I can think of Bumblebee is the only insect that, in other words, that can pollinate the bottle brush gentian, which is a native plant. And the blossom is closed, so the bumblebee can open it up and get in again to get the nectar. When a plant emerges, when a flower emerges, and when the bee emerges, you know, it's matched.
Another great example, they're not in bloom now, but blueberry. There are bees that have co-evolved with blueberries. And so blueberry flowers are really small, so it's really teeny bees that have evolved to pollinate blueberries.
Yeah, and just again to get another shout out to the bumblebee is it can do something that some bees can do, but they're a pro at it, which is buzz pollination. So they can, and they do this with blueberries and cranberries and peppers. They get in there, they grab a hold of the flower, and they vibrate their flight muscles, and they shake the pollen loose. And when they do that, they emit a tiny high buzz that matches the note of middle C on the piano. There are other native bees that can also buzz pollinate, but bumblebees.
I didn't actually know that.
Yeah, bumblebees do a great job at it.
So all the plants in here are native perennials that support pollinators. There's a variety of flower shape, color, and bloom season for the pollinators. And again, kids from the youth camp have helped us plant this over the past 9 years. And this is what it becomes.
In our seed program, again, we talk about, you know, how do we get a seed? Through pollination. And then they dissect the seeds, and so we get into seed anatomy, and we go out and look for different ways that seeds are dispersed. So with the horticultural team, we planted a neat flower called Balsam Impatiens. I think so. It's really a fantastic plant because it's one of the few plants that has mechanical seed dispersal. When you touch the seed pod, it just pops. So you can imagine how fun that is for kids. So that's a great plant. And the bumblebees love it. So it serves two purposes for us. We have a website with all of our school program listings, and then we also send out a poster to every teacher that we work with. They've already received it, and so they pick and choose, and then they schedule a program with us, and we're off and running. And spring is a really busy time, and fall is less busy, but it's pretty busy. I want them to foster a personal connection to the natural world and to be good stewards of the earth. It's the game plan.
Okay, so obviously I'm not a professional florist and not a professional floral arranger. But that's kind of the beauty of a hobby like this. It's one of my favorite hobbies because you can just kind of mess around. Pick some of the flowers in your garden and just create your own little piece of artwork, I guess. Some of us, we draw with crayons, others, we paint impressionist paintings. I'm more of the crayon type. So I did go out and get a few other things. You saw that I added some of these Play in the Blues salvia, and then I got some of this buddleia, butterfly bush. This is a Miss Violet buddleia, just to create some structure in the background, and I love that blue-green foliage. Then I added some more pink dinner plate dahlias, this little cluster of the fairy rose in the back here, and then a little Wizard of Oz pom-pom dahlia there. So I think I'm just gonna spend the rest of this evening just finishing up this arrangement and enjoying all of the beautiful sounds of our pollinators in this garden. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll see you next time on Our Gardens.